I guess the best way to do it is to do it. Hello and welcome to the Iron Mountain Hour. It's Sunday, September the 26th, 2021. We are here in beautiful Carter County, Tennessee. My name is Cliff.
I'm Tim.
And we are sitting here. It's kind of sunny out, man, but it's starting to feel like fall. Pretty sweet.
It's starting to smell like it, dude.
Yeah, and we're getting closer to Halloween, which is, my Halloween. That's my holiday. Mm-hmm. My wife and I actually got married on Halloween.
On Halloween?
Yeah. At 3 a.m.
Oh.
Go figure. Yeah, so the conspiracy theorists out there
might
have something to say about that.
Is your wife a witchy plant trying to hex you?
Well, we had a pretty cool spot, and that just felt like the appropriate time to do it. And the kind of ceremony we had, it's the appropriate place to do it. And we call this show the Iron Mountain Hour. The Iron Mountain is right there next to the Unica Mountain, over where Red Fork Falls and the beauty spot is over in Unicoi County, right there on the North Carolina line. And today on the Iron Mountain Hour, we're going to discuss a little bit of something called feral people. Tim, have you heard anything about feral people?
Yeah. I guess you could really argue that I've seen feral people, because back when we were younger, we would go up to the Watauga Dam, and you could hike that little smidge of the Appalachian Trail that's there. And every now and then you could see pretty raggedy individuals that obviously had no home. So that's that's not as feral as you're going to talk about.
Yeah.
But the idea that you can just walk trails and live off the land and that sort of thing, I don't think what you're about to talk about is completely unbelievable. So.
Well, you could make the argument that that's feral. I feel like the feral people we're talking about are less likely to be spotted than those folks, and you would kind of see them fairly regularly when you would go around the Appalachian Trail, where hikers would go through. It's kind of where you kind of tended to see those guys around. And we see a lot of different people come through this area.
Okay, hold on 1 second before we start going down a rabbit hole. Did Tim just call Appalachian hikers feral? No, I'm very well aware. The definition of feral is like the long hair, what pigs in captivity are smooth, and then you set them out in the wild and they grow the tusks and all that stuff. So I know the idea of feral is the nails get longer. You can find, we learned about it in psychology, intro to psych actually, of a kid. I believe he was 12. They found him either in Russia or someplace like that, and they were fascinated that for 12 years he lived by himself in the woods, and it was almost impossible to domesticate him. And they've had several cases of that sort of thing happening. No. So I know what feral means before I have to put a little pin in that so I don't offend a bunch of people that like to hike. I'm saying the idea that you could see people that only stay on a trail in the woods, and that's just how they live, just really shows the adaptability of human beings. And I think it's very likely, with as thick as the Appalachian Mountains are around here, that there just are people who are just raw dogging it out in the woods because you could. So anyway, go ahead.
Well, you're right. It's something about the human brain that gives us the intelligence to be able to figure out how to make up for our evolutionary shortcomings with tools or, equipment that we use, traps to catch things, weapons that we make to be able to hunt with. We're able to study patterns of animals as they go through the woods, realize where they go, track them by their excrement, and find other ways to get food. We find different plants that we can eat. We experiment and find things that work. So it's pretty, believable that an individual human who comes from, the same evolutionary line as other humans would be able to live in the woods unassisted and without any modern conveniences or, tools even. It's kind of something in our brain to naturally start to make tools. We've evolved to that point evolutionarily as, monkeys and apes, you'll see them, they pick up tools, pick up rocks and use them for tools. And that's something we see with them. So that's a very basic thing for a primate. Or
in psychology they call it design stance, is when you can look at sort of like how they recognize that there's different levels of IQ, as you would see when the monkey sees a rock and he uses it to crack something open. just knowing that you can use a rock to do that is a completely different thing. Like, dogs have it in certain cases where they can recognize that they can pull. Most animals have some level of design stance, or a cat wouldn't even be able to use its claws. I don't know if I said something stupid there. That's pretty funny.
No.
But design stance is what it comes into, and there's something about humans that they do have it, because the first thing a human would do when it gets cold is to find like a blanket or something. And once again, that's also design stance, because I don't know, man, we're pretty squishy. Like, we're pretty helpless in this world, so I think that's almost one of the biggest traits about humans is like we're hermit crabs. We just have to adapt.
I wondered one time I saw cows, laying out in the field, and the sun was shining on them, and all the cows were moving to the shade, and they were laying down in the shade, and I wondered, do the cows just automatically know that shade is cooler, or are they just used to going to that spot? Either way, that our brains figure it out, and I'm not sure what that question I have posed to myself really has to do with it, other than just kind of shows you the things I think about when I'm driving in the car by myself. But that's interesting that you bring it up, that it's an instinct kind of, but it's also learned behavior too, because your brain automatically, if you're having a hard time getting into something, you got to figure out something. You got to use your brain if you're going to get into it. But these people who live in the woods apparently have chosen to do so and have not really lived among society. And people spot them out in the hills of Appalachia. Just the other day, probably about a week or two ago, on the Discovery Channel, the Josh Gates produced show Expedition X. We came down to Newport, Tennessee. That's down in, I believe it's in Cocke County, and they did a report on feral people who'd been spotted, and people independently of one another had reported these people and drawn them. They had a sketch artist draw them, and they looked very similar. And what it was a large man covered in hair, with no clothes, where he had a beard, long hair, and he was in both cases said to have gnashed his teeth or have growled. And apparently they're fairly common to people report seeing this. And one of the people that they showed on the show, who reported seeing one a long time ago, had said that she came across a man eating a deer in the woods. It just had a dead deer and was just ripping it apart and eating it. And apparently that's a pretty common report to see something like that in this area. Now, have you ever come across anything like that? I'm holding back every single Appalachian Trail.
I was trying my best not to derail it with bath salt jokes.
Yeah. Oh man, please. that's what's going to make the show, man. Because I'll get back on track.
I didn't finish the video I was watching on it about the. Do you remember when the guy ate the dude's face? And everybody was like, it was bath salts.
It was in Florida.
Yeah, and it turned out that he wasn't on drugs, but that's kind of what started that bath salts rumor. But
he wasn't on drugs.
They had trace amounts of marijuana, which it was pretty sure
it's
it's Paulides Stadium too. Yeah, they think what really happened was they think he'd walked too far, and he had like heat on his. There's a bunch of. Anyway, the video broke down exactly why it happened. It wasn't just a guy who went, "I'm going to eat a person," and went walking dead on him. Man, there's always another side to these stories that people just don't talk about, and I always think it's so
you can see the first
to
part
really go back and be like, now what just happened here?
And I saw that story for about 6 months, and that's one thing that kind of is going to come up repeatedly on this show, is the way that things are reported in the media and the sensationalism around certain events.
Well, it was the zombie craze at the same time too. So it was just the media was like, "Well, this isn't going away."
This story is pump this story out. Yeah, get it on Facebook.
What? I've heard the word bath salts before. Well, that's our word.
Yeah.
That's our boogeyman right there. So, but with the feral thing, no, I've never. Also, I've heard people say that they had seen feral people, particularly like around the Blue Hole and that sort of thing. That's where that could be where the method jokes come from too, around the Blue Hole. But yeah, I've heard of it. Never seen any feral eating people. I'm wondering now that you said that eat deers, if we want to play. I'm going to choose right now for the sake of the interest to go and be the conspiracy theorist a little bit harder. Okay. So, could we link these to Skinwalkers out in, was it? I guess it's the West, but I guess it goes up north and like Wyoming and places like that too.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit about Skinwalker Ranch. I know it's a pretty popular thing in the conspiracy world, but I've not really delved into it.
Okay, well, the idea of like the Skinwalker is there's different
there's a lot into it, isn't it? It's
well,
not like there's all these different things converging on this one area. Is what
it seems like a really lame conspiracy theory at first because it seems like people are just telling ghost stories. Mm-hmm. But one of my favorite theories of the Skinwalkers. Well, first of all, the background is it's a shapeshifter. Okay. That tries to lure you in, and then nobody happens, but you just go missing. But some stories they say they replace you with a clone, and now that thing walks among people. But I think one of the better ones is goes back to this feral thing here, is that it's a form of a native human that has been here for a long time, but that has been its feral technique has been to essentially kind of like would be lure people in by impersonating what we would think a normal human would be.
Right. Hello, fellow humans.
Yeah, that sort of thing, and then they get close to you, and all of a sudden their chest opens up, and they just eat you and become you, or something crazy.
Okay.
But if we dial it back just a little bit.
See, I didn't even hear that much into it. The only thing I knew is they say you go out to the desert, and you see UFOs, you'll see ghosts, you'll see hear voices, things will touch you, you'll see crazy things walking around, crazy animals, cryptids. And...
I don't know as much about the actual Skinwalker Ranch as I actually do just about Skinwalkers.
Okay.
They have them all the way up in they talk about Skinwalkers as far as like Alaska and places like that. But it's a Native American sort of boogeyman. Like I guess we have like vampires, werewolves. Ukrainians have Baba Yaga.
Wendigos.
Actually, one of the oldest vampire stories actually does go back to Ukraine.
Yeah.
But the idea of the Ukrainian boogeyman with the vampires goes sort of this thing too. It's a cabin that they would leave in the woods with a mill that looked like it's a place that people would live, and then travelers would come by, look in there, and be like, "Oh, it looks like it's lived in," so they would come inside because it looks homely, and then people that eat people, all the vampires, would come by, and if somebody was just happening to be staying in their cabin at night, they knew they could eat them, and it was an easier way than having to track people down.
Kind of sounds like Hansel and Gretel, too.
It does, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. It just seems to be we seem to be ingraining this idea into, almost like warning children at a young age. Look, there are people out there that want to eat you, whatever that word means.
And people who lure you in with free things are not to be trusted, and that's a good thing to learn too.
Yes.
But yeah, there's a new Netflix movie just came out the other day. It's like a kid made for kids, but pretty scary. But for younger kids, it's still pretty scary. Called Night Books, and it's a modern take on Hansel and Gretel. And the way that, it starts off as a kid, he's upset about something, and then he gets lured in from his apartment into, I think it was a pumpkin pie or something, something that made him feel good. And then the other girl that was in there got lured in by some kind of chicken dish, something that made her feel good when she was feeling down. They were both sad, and then something that made them feel good was what was used to lure them in, and that was a pretty good little movie. I liked watching it with the kids. But back to the feral people. I don't know about any stories of them eating people, but at least not.
That's the one you were talking about.
Peter the Wild Boy. Yeah, that's
Georgia
right.
and England was the one. I think he was like 12 or something. Before people, if anybody wants to look it up on themselves before we continue. I've never heard about them eating people. I've heard of there's a cat man. I'll have to look that up. That's a dumb one too. There's what they call the cat man of Wales or something like that. Maybe he's in Scotland. I'll have to look it up. But he's covered in head to toe in dirt. He's never attacked anybody. He just walks around he crawls around eating out the trash cans and stuff.
Yeah, I've heard of that guy too. So that I would qualify that as feral. And like Tim mentioned earlier, he kind of glanced over it, but I'm not sure a lot of people know, Tim, when you spoke about the pig or the hog going feral. When a hog goes out into the wild and is not confined in a pen and is not fed regularly, it will revert to a wild hog. Oh, yeah. I mean, within a couple of months, it will grow huge tusks, huge teeth, and it will come from a cute looking fat
coarse
pig.
Hair.
Yeah,
very coarse hair, like
longer snout.
Yeah, I guess I did gloss over that. They adapt pretty quick because it essentially goes from being babe that's a larva. It's so pink and squishy, And then that makes sense because they said it was really strange. The boy's fingernails was just crazy thick and just all this stuff. I mean, you're going to adapt to the wild.
Instead of trimming your fingernails, you're going to be using your fingernails, and they're going to just like when you build a callus on your hand when you go out and shovel the yard a couple days, or rake the garden or hoe the garden or whatever. You get that callus the first day you do it. Then you go back and you wear gloves that time until it heals, and you keep doing it. Eventually, you got a big thick pocket of flesh there, or like playing guitar. You might tear your fingers up the first few times you do it, but eventually you build that callus. And I imagine the same thing would be for the rest of the human body to a degree.
Tie kickers, they kick that tree over and over again until the bone will splinter. And they used to think that was a myth until they obviously Thailand in 2021 is it's pretty damn advanced at this point. So I mean, there's all these documentaries of why the Thai martial art was so superior to just normal kickboxing at the time. And there was this really good kickboxer you can find a video on where they go up against him, and the kickboxer really wears him out the first 2 rounds. But then what he didn't notice was the Thai boxers, not only are they doing this kickboxing stuff, they have all these crazy workouts where they beat the crap out of their own bodies so they can just take more and more damage.
Yeah.
And he just literally cut this guy down like a tree at the ankle because he realized this guy's reach wasn't going to do it. So I'm just going to keep throwing the same low kick until he just eventually just broke his ankle after he couldn't take it anymore. And I think that kind of goes the same thing. The very first thing your body's going to need to adapt to is survivability and stuff. So feral people's hair is always nappy. It looks like the predators. It doesn't even dread up properly. It looks like a blanket. Your nails get unnaturally thick because I imagine we have to dig or climb or something. So no, I've never heard them eating people. to get back on topic, I've never heard of feral people eating people. Well, and I think that is a taboo. And anytime there's been cannibalism in the world, if you look at, there's a shortage of protein. If we want to make people feel better about it. Yeah. Well, because I want to say it was like a documentary I watched called Let's Talk About Uncomfortable Mexico or something, and it was a Mexican guy talking about why there was cannibalism practiced in Mexico at one point in time with all the human sacrifices and all this stuff. But then he goes through all these different places. Every place that has cannibalism, with the exception of emergency situations like the Donner Party or something like that, it's usually because there's no cows. So. So maybe humans aren't that bad.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe.
And then we talk about New Zealand.
Well, yeah. I think most of us are pretty good, but it seems like the small number of us were relatively small. I don't know how small, but I think more than half of people at least are good. But then you have some really smart people who are not good and who don't care about being good.
You think it's a maturity issue with the smartness thing? Without even going into the idea of sociopaths and psychopaths and stuff. There are some very, very smart people, obviously, that make a lot of money and stuff. But I'm just wondering, it's like that whole, I guess, that cliche of, well, not every person, fill in the blank, not every stereotype. So obviously, the world would be a much, much, much worse place if being rich meant you were just a psychopath and just absolutely just absorbed everything you got your hands on. But people do that.
No, I'd just say being a psychopath would make it easier to become rich because you wouldn't have those pesky morals. You have the narcissistic drive, and you wouldn't have the pesky morals getting in the way. But for whatever drives cannibalism, that's good. It's good that we don't see the feral people of Appalachia engaging in it.
It's good that we've never. Otherwise, I guess we'd have a lot more of the Rainbow family getting eaten on the way to Asheville.
Yeah. Well, would they report it? Those guys really kind of, they're kind of feral, aren't they? Don't they live outside?
No, I think they kind of take care of each other. I think.
No, I just mean I guess I should say feral in that they stay out of society and live kind of in their own society.
Yeah, I guess I don't really
kind of intermingle with.
I don't really want to speak for the Rainbow family. I've just never had a negative interaction with them.
It
just always seems like a bunch of hippies that just kind of don't like.
Well, I guess I'm saying in the broadest sense of the word, the feral. Now, I'm not talking about,
Yeah, so you're doing the same thing I did earlier when I said hikers were feral.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I guess he's never going to watch this, but in case he does, James Kerr. No, his son Dagan Kerr did the entire Appalachian Trail in one stint this spring, summer, whatever this is. But it's about 2,500 miles, if I'm not mistaken. And I thought that was cool. But anyway, and he didn't get eaten.
All right, well, good. That's awesome.
So there, congratulations.
Yeah, well, congratulations indeed. That's quite an accomplishment. I would really like to do that. I hiked the Appalachian Trail a lot, when I was probably in my younger teenage years, and but I was in Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts and stuff like that up till 13 or 14. So we did a lot of that. And
did you ever do the bridge behind the church? Up near the lake? I don't know if it was a part of the thing. It was just a challenge that people wanted. There's a swinging bridge behind. If you go up to Watauga Lake right now, the dam, there's that church that looks like it's off of Jeepers Creepers. Yeah. If you look down below it, there's a swinging bridge.
Somebody bought that. Yeah. No, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah.
No, sorry. It just got in my head. I was like, I wonder if he's ever been on the swinging bridge.
Yeah, I think somebody lives in that church now.
Do they?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Do you remember that really sketchy swinging bridge that used to be over in Bluff City? Over there by the train tracks. Okay, they built a really nice one now, and it's a big steel suspension bridge. But that thing, I remember going across it as a kid and had my foot go through a board on it, and just a little kid, so I couldn't have been that heavy. And it was one of my earliest memories of being alive.
Do you have a fear of heights?
No, actually, no, I don't actually, but I can still remember that really, really clearly. And I am always careful when I come across bridges in the woods. Yeah. You'll come across them every now and then.
You ever come across a staircase in the woods?
Well, in fact, I do seem to have a memory of doing that as a kid, and it just seemed very out of place.
Okay, before we go down that, are we talking about you just found a staircase, or are you talking about like the whole phenomenon of sometimes people finding staircases that shouldn't be there and then they go missing or whatever?
Well, that was what I wanted to lead into with this. I've seen them in the woods,
just be clear.
And I've seen the place I'm talking about. I don't remember where it was, somewhere on Holston Mountain, but there was a little stream, and we would go up there and. When I was a kid, we'd go up there and cut firewood and load up my dad's van, and we'd take the dogs up there with us, and the dogs would always jump in this concrete shell that had a stream going through it, and it would fill this concrete shell up with water. The dogs would jump in there and swim around. Sometimes we kids would jump in there after we would get done loading up the wood and be hot and stuff. But anyway, around there, it was just out in the middle of the woods, middle of nowhere, and there was a little set of stairs out there in the middle of nowhere also, but it was kind of off.
How many
from
stairs do you think?
It was pretty short, so I imagine it was from a house that was built. Whoever built that. So mine's not one of the weird staircase in the woods stories, but what I was bringing up the staircases in the woods about was something I read. It was on Reddit Nosleep, right? Which is, it's usually fictitious stories that people make up to be like creepy. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Okay. Creepypasta, yeah, for all the kids out there. I didn't know what creepypasta was until very recently.
You're going to be the Redditor, because I actually don't read it.
Okay.
I guess I filtered my way down because, sorry to put a thing in this, but you're going to be the official on Reddit, because I'll have to tell you I don't know much about it at all, because most of the stuff that makes it to Reddit, I'm usually like down there in the grime looking for it before it gets there. Right. But that's but a lot of it's been missing.
Yeah, Reddit is like
so big.
Reddit's kind of downstream from like the Chans and stuff like that. It's kinda,
a little bit, but I really feel like people have gotten pushed into certain ones now, because once upon a time it was so spread out that information would come from like the conspiracy the pieces of Reddit, and then it would come from Poll on 4chan, or what is it, X on 4chan or whatever. There's all these different pages and stuff that would have it stuff, and everybody was going to cross it, and it seemed like all the lefties got pushed, normal lefty people got pushed into Reddit, and then you could only go to 4chan if you were a freak or an alt-righter, and then then over here at 9gag, and everybody got pushed around.
Yeah, the internet balkanized.
Yeah, it did something weird, and I just didn't do that. I just kept on looking at everything.
Yeah, same here.
And so many people were sending me Reddit stuff, even through text message. So I was like, well, I guess that one I don't have to look at. Because you guys keep telling me all the interesting stuff you find anyway. Yeah. So go ahead with your story, sorry.
Well, no, it's when I was on Reddit, I was checking out something on the Nosleep subreddit, again, which is usually stories, just creepypasta. People making up cool stories. And I got to the point where I didn't really read it anymore. It just was kind of like, this is boring, and this is, it's one of those that you just see and you read the headline and like, ooh, scary. Okay, I'm going on. But I came across one. It was an older one. I think it's from 6 years ago, and I think it was one of the top ones in the subreddit. But I bet if you search Reddit staircases in the woods, you'll find it, or Reddit search and rescue. If you want to read it, it's a long thread, but it's someone who purports to be a search and rescue worker who goes looking for missing people in the national forests.
Okay.
And he tells some weird stuff like, oh, the dogs track people up to the edge of a cliff, and or the base of a cliff, and they want to climb the cliff, and there's no handholds or anything. And always, we find people in some weird places. Sometimes we found a kid tucked up under a rock, and it's kind of like he's telling you all these weird things, and then one of them he says, just kind of as an aside, and the weird, the most common thing that kind of all the search and rescue guys and park rangers know about, but nobody really talks about, it's kind of an open secret, are the staircases in the woods.
Okay.
And that's all he says about it. And a lot of people commented, what's going on? This is when the going back and looking through the comments, this was when the thing was first posted. People were saying, hey, asking all these questions, and usually people wouldn't respond to something like that on this subreddit. They would everybody would assume that it's a scary story, and then go on about their rave. But people were treating like this was a real person. And he was pretending to be a real person, if nothing else, which is the normal. You write them usually from the first person in these stories. But this guy, he comes back and he answers some of these questions, and then he goes into more detail about a few things, including the staircases in the woods. And what he'd say is that he gave an example of the first time he was out looking for somebody. They were on a search and rescue, and he goes to where They found the person he was looking for, and his trainee says, "Come on, let's go back here. I want to show you somewhere that we find a lot of missing people." And so while they're taking this missing person back, they walk through this area, and he said he sees something kind of standing far away, and it's like all these straight, he's like, that's kind of weird to see that. It catches his attention, so he walks over towards it, and he's kind of mesmerized, and he's standing there, he's staring at it, and the trainee she doesn't really sneak up behind him, but he's kind of focused on it, so he kind of spooks him and says, he says, "What is this?" And she said, "You're going to see a lot of them, get used to it." And he starts to go for it, and she grabs him and just says, "Don't touch him, don't go up him, or, don't just go on, and whatever you do, don't go up him." And he says, "Why?" And she just doesn't say anything. And he says that's kind of the attitude that everybody has in it. And again, you think, is this a just a story? And but then you see people chiming in on the comments saying, "No, I'm a search and rescue operator also, and we do find staircases out in the woods. I think they're just parts of old houses because they have." And then other people says, "No, they don't have foundations. There's nothing else around. These will be sometimes 40, 50 miles out in the woods. There's no rock walls. There's no foundations. There's no." And they can
Did they say how many steps there were? Because you said there was just a couple.
This looked like maybe front stoop steps.
But with the ones I described, is it just like little stoops with them that are strange, or are they talking about like flights?
Well, I'll try to insert. We put this up because I figured out how to do that when I was uploading the last one. There's a handful of pictures available on the internet, but a lot of the stories, people say that they're not able to keep the pictures, that the pictures are disappearing from their phones. And there's even a video that I saw from, I can't remember. It's one of those that just basically explains everyday life to you. One of these YouTube channels, and they said, our staircase is really in the woods, and it says, well, there was a phenomenon of people, talking about this, so people started building them just to freak other people out.
So they're saying it's like a crop circle situation.
Yeah.
Okay.
But before before this, I think this post on Reddit was what started the whole thing. But so before all this started with this, people were chiming in and they were saying, "Hey, no, I see these things too," and they are sometimes. The guy that posted the original Reddit thread to No Sleep said he sees probably one in every 5 times he goes in the woods he sees one, and they're just kind of so random, and he's not even doesn't think anything of it now. And people were also chiming in and saying, "We see them too. We don't really talk about them either. They can be big, small. They can be metal. They can be wood. They can have carpet. They are usually they usually have very little, if any, moss or anything like that growing on. There's usually no leaves on them, and they look like they're clean and standing out in the woods with,
Okay.
Yeah. So, if anybody watching knows that where any staircases in the woods are, even if they're not any crazy ones like that, I'd like to go out and see them just because I think it's pretty cool. And you could comment on the video and let us know about that.
That's it, yeah. Especially since they're clean.
Yeah.
Have you heard? I usually listen to a lot. I used to work night shift all the time, and so of course I go through periods I just listen to ghost stories and stuff. And I noticed with a lot of these, like the missing 411s and stuff, where the people manage to escape. I don't know how that works, but the ones where people manage to get away, these could also be ghost stories too. But there were several of them where they reported hearing like a large clank. Almost like, I think one of them, because this is what could be a plant when somebody says it this accurately, said it almost sounded like a mechanism, like a trap closing, and I just got out. So I don't know. I thought that's interesting too. Then I had a thought of like, what if that's like the Matrix glitching you or something, and that's when people go missing?
You ever see that movie, The Cabin in the Woods, the Joss Whedon film?
I wouldn't say I have.
It's kind of a spoof. It's kind of a spoof horror movie, but it actually has some smart ideas to it. Because it kind of it's kind of that all the horror movies that you see are real, but they're being created in a CIA lab that's like bringing real monsters in the world.
Yeah.
I thought that was a pretty cool movie, but
I forgot all about that until you just said that. I was like, oh yeah, I have seen that.
But yeah, the missing 411. That David Paulides puts on a show called Missing 411. Or you said you hadn't seen a whole lot of it?
I know about 411, but I don't know about the person you're talking about.
Okay, well his name is spelled Paulides. It's kind of hard to find him if you just hear his name, because
we can link him in the video.
Yeah, I'll stick him on there because I wanted to tell you guys to go check out a video he did called. Well, I can't remember what it's called either, but it was about summer whales, and I'll link it to you.
Okay.
Apparently, the area where summer whales was missing is a common area for someone to go missing regularly. And there was also another disappearance in her family that was very odd. But David could tell you more about it if you go watch his video. Again, I'll link it in the description. And you guys check that out and see what you think about that. They still haven't found that little girl. She's been, missing... 6 months now or something like that, and I've not really seen a lot about it in the news lately. You kind of heard a lot about it at first, and it kind of faded off. But just hope for the best for her and her family. But it's not looking real good, as far as them finding her. But anyway, check out the David Paulides video and see what you think about it. A lot of weird stuff in that video that I'm not as familiar with that I can really give you a rundown on it or anything. But yeah, go check that out before next time and talk about that with us if you see anything. Tim, I know we were kind of not sure what we were going to talk about today. We had a guest scheduled who wasn't feeling well.
He got sick
and had to cancel with us. So hope he's doing all right. But when we're going to have him back on, and when we have him on, we're going to talk about movies that were made in the Carter County, Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia area, because there's actually quite a few.
Okay.
And so one of them was made in Carter County here, and it's pretty interesting. So I'm going to see if we can't put together a little something for everybody on that.
That's cool.
And whenever we do that show. So,
you know what I think's interesting about, because we keep, all this I feel like is kind of tied together here. The idea that people, feral people even, the idea that people can live completely off the grid and you just they don't interact with other humans. They're not a part of the hive. They're just out of it. And then we start talking about the missing 411, about people going missing, just alarming amount of people going missing in the same areas, beyond just what we talked about before we hit record, that yes, people do go missing in national parks and stuff that shouldn't go missing, but at the same time, they're so big and so many people visit them, maybe the stats should be in there. But since, for the sake of interest, I'm going to go this direction with it and say, what are the odds that there's also people that live off the grid that don't want us to know about them, because essentially we don't have it's like humans don't have a predator. Like, we're kind of like an ant colony.
Humans are our own predator,
like,
you know.
Yeah, like, so at some point, the reason humans don't have anything to eat them because we have a hive and we don't want to acknowledge it. And so humans have to start eating other people. And I'm wondering if that's not where vampires come from. The idea that this cabin's out there and these Ukrainian vampires are going to come in and get you. And then you also have the vampire. Like, they were using, I'm wanting to say it was in Cambodia or Vietnam. I don't remember where they were using they were using the myth that they would take soldiers or like dead people from the opposite side, drain them, put holes in their neck, and then they would leave the body laying out there. Because they have vampire myths down in the South Pacific too, and that's a really long way from Ukraine. Vampires just seem to be
it's a universal.
It's a universal legend, just like dragons, just like a lot of things, and it always involves blood. It always involves these nocturnal creatures. They seem to be pretty damn similar when they describe them, as far as even with the races. Like, why would a person from Cambodia, which is a very dark-skinned Asian person, why would they know what a tall, Nordic-looking, like, Bill from, whatever the name of that stupid Louisiana vampire show was? They always describe them like that. And it's just, it seems too coincidental that they always... So I'm just wondering...
I didn't know that. Now, in Cambodia, they describe giant...
they describe it more like... well, they describe them pale.
Okay.
So I guess you could describe them as being dead, and that's why but they're always pale. You never hear of a vampire that's not pale, and it's always nocturnal. I guess that could always equate to it too, because light-skinned things live in the dark. But I guess we could leave the detail out and just say vampires are universal, and I'm wondering on what level, if that's not just human trafficking from the elites from the very early days, and that we've always been trafficking humans, and not we. That the elites have always been trafficking humans, because, like, man, they have vampire myths.
They have. I mean,
they have vampire myths out in like Egypt, in places like that. What do they call it in the Islamic countries? They have China. I'm just saying, vampires are very universal. I'm just wondering if that's not the same way it's ingrained in us, like whatever it was we just talked about being ingrained in us.
Well, you're right about people having been. I mean, people have been one of the biggest commodities in the history of the world, and they continue to be today. There is a large human trafficking market, let's say. It's still something that happens, and back then they were a lot more open about it. They would, fill ships with people and take humans from one place to another.
Yeah, so, did you count that? I guess I know human trafficking with the slave. They were very open about. They've always been open. It's even in the Bible. They didn't try to hide the record that they're slavery. What about eating them?
Well, I guess what I was getting at though was people were open about owning people who were from a different place than them for the most part.
Yeah.
But this would be something totally different, like you said.
But it was super taboo. Like, there was a case of, they made an American Horror Story season out of this lady down in New Orleans that was super, super abusive to her slaves, to the point where people, when found out about it, they tried to go kill her. But she got out of Dodge. And it turned out, like, that's what I'm saying, like, slavery was legal there. And people were still upset that she was, like, locking people up and like, experimenting on them, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, because there's still that part of us where even though your mind is still in a shitty spot if you think it's okay to own somebody, it really takes a special kind of sickness to be like, oh, you eat them too? That's okay.
Yeah.
And those people do exist, and I'm just wondering if that's not our predator, our ultimate predator wouldn't want us to know it exists. Kind of like a spider wouldn't just be out there with a giant thing, announcing to the moths, "Hey, I'll be over here by the light later." I'm just wondering if that's not what a lot of these missing cases are and stuff. There's just not a lot of whatever we call vampirism. Because I'm not saying that there's blood drinkers literally existing, although it's probably pretty damn likely because blood's
I would
valuable.
say so. Yeah. Well, there's our vampire, colonies, if you will, of people who call themselves vampires. They live as vampires, and they also have people who let them drink their blood.
Mm-hmm.
And these people
are they LARPing?
I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously they're human beings, but they.
What if it's more like a Peter Thiel sort of thing? And I don't really necessarily have a giant beef with Peter Thiel. He's the only one I can come up with right now that I know does it. Where he goes in periodically, I don't know what the time is, but he drains his blood out and puts new people's blood back in.
Yeah,
he's paying young people to do this, a lot of money to let him do this. But isn't that like vampirism?
Yeah, I guess it is. They did experiments and showed that if you take a rat, and give it a baby rat's blood and
oh yeah, the evidence is definitely there.
It'll make that rat rejuvenated. It'll have more energy, more testosterone. Mm-hmm. It'll be just more lively. And so people have been doing that too. It's pretty common. It was so common actually among, Silicon Valley types that it was in the show Silicon Valley, kind of as a gag, among the, where one of the wealthy CEOs out there had what he called a blood boy who would come and sit, a certain time every day and donate blood, and it would go straight into the guy. And he would get a rush, and then it's like a B12 shot. And he had a healthy young man who would come in and give him a blood transfusion at a certain time every day, and that's something that happens.
Do you think this connects? Well, okay, do you think this connects to all this though?
Well, that's
how my mind wants to work it.
Well, you know what? It's funny how these shows work out because we didn't have a plan for this. The only thing, we
thunder that way. I really do think.
Yeah, we showed up and we thought about a couple things we might want to talk about, and here's what we come to. Now you're finding a way to connect them, which is kind of how conspiracy theories work, isn't it?
I'm not saying I'm right, but that pattern of behavior where maybe suddenly becomes that's what happens.
Yeah, because we feel like because we're looking at something that kind of leads logically or illogically from one thing to another, that they must be connected, and I don't know that's what's happening. I don't want to say that's what's happening.
Conspiracy theory,
but
but that's how it happens.
But we did go there, and
okay, since we're here. I'll give you a starting point.
That's what I'm saying.
This is okay.
Go ahead.
Let's assume that part's real, but what happens if, because we're so appalled. She was essentially drinking the blood of black slaves, and the white people were so appalled that she was doing that they wanted to go kill her.
Right.
So even shitty people that allow slavery still aren't okay with it. But what if it was a different species? So what if pick your planet comes down here and they go, we look close enough, we can probably live with them because there's only 40 of us making up a number. What if there's only 42, just to pick a good number from masonry? And then we just blend in with them, but we need to live longer because we got to prime this place up for when the mothership gets here or whatever. So we got to breed with them. So every now we got to eat a few people to stay alive a little bit longer, and we don't care to do that because that's not our people anyway. I'm just saying, what if it's Martians that have been nibbling on us for 10,000 years? You know what I'm saying?
Well. You could be right, Tim.
I'm just saying.
I don't think so.
Okay, you can go.
No, you might be right. I don't know. I can't really follow you there, although it is fun to
Okay, well, let's start at the beginning then.
No. I mean,
I'm
right there with you. I hear what you're saying. I just don't know if I'm ready to go there yet. But I do follow you.
Okay, well, I'll give you a starting place to argue that leaves you in less of a bad spot because I feel like that's a really weird spot to put you on. The Anunnaki and all the ancient alien beliefs, it seems like when the aliens got here, they helped people, right? Here's some fire. Here's what they call a medicine bag is what all the archetypes are always seen in all these, all the stonework. They usually have what they call a life bag with them or something. And so the theory was a group of aliens got here and they tried to help people because we were bumbling idiots, and so they gave us some things.
Now, Tim's talking about how another thing that's in cultures all around the world is depictions of visitors from the stars or from the sky giving people flame or
like almost like
whatever
a very symbolic item that they couldn't really hold, like just like an open flame.
Yeah.
Or
you got your Prometheus, you've got and Egypt,
Lucifer on some level.
Lucifer the light bearer. You've got Quetzalcoatl the winged serpent. I mean, you've got all these different deities bringing fire for especially fire. But there's also just names for the sun too. You could also think about that too.
Well, I could really make a bunch of. I don't want to. Don't get me on the sun because. Okay.
Anyway, I don't want to keep going that way either. Because so let me get back on track and just get back to saying that basically, that's something you see around the world is that a visitor from the sky brought flame. Yeah. And that's something Ancient Aliens, the television show, brought to the light to a lot of people, because a lot of people hadn't seen things like that. And I'd been reading it for quite a while and been interested in that since I was a kid.
Because Doniken was like 70s. Eric von Doniken was one of the mainstreamers. My dad and the church, it wasn't at the time.
He wrote the Chariots of Fire.
Chariots of the Gods.
Chariots of the Gods.
And I remember the church would every now and then make a joke that I didn't quite get when I was a kid, where it was like they would make fun of. I remember back when Doniken was trying to convince it was aliens or something. Like, so apparently that really did outrage the church when he started doing that on some level. So it did make a mark before Ancient Aliens, because this was back in 91-ish.
Yeah, that's true. There was Eric von Doniken, and he was doing a lot of the same things. He was pointing out ancient texts that showed visitors from the sky. And I guess Ancient Aliens was kind of a revival, and I guess it was built on
at least
work.
The first 3 seasons were his, and not really his, but yeah.
And like you and I were talking, Tim, when we said we might talk about this in the show, was it's kind of weird that we're seeing aliens on the History Channel and the government talking about aliens and saying pretty much, you got the government let it put out the UAP report that they put out this summer, and they kind of built it up like it was going to be this big study, but it was just a couple dozen pages basically saying we see these things in the sky too, we don't know what they are here, and they've released videos of a couple of them, but we think it's a threat. We better have more money for national defense or something.
Man, I don't know about that. Like, I kind of think now, like, I do think those things are there, but like, man, I just don't trust it when they don't. It's almost like they just want more money and they don't really need it. I don't know.
Well, I mean, what is? I don't get what's the angle on it, because they're just telling us a little bit of stuff about it, but they're not. I mean, they're teasing us with it.
Hey, MUFON. Yeah, you guys are right. That's all they've done.
Yeah, they've just kind of teased us with it, and so why even tell us about it at all? I'm curious about why is it. I mean, it's like we got normalized through Ancient Aliens and through other shows too. But especially that Ancient Aliens happened to come out right before, you really had to start to have all these disclosures from the Pentagon, and they released the Tic Tac video. If you're not familiar with the Tic Tac video, look it up. It's really visually kind of unimpressive, but when you think about what you're seeing and you understand how fast things are moving, if it is what is actually depicted, it's pretty wild. But again, just to look at it, it's kind of unimpressive. But you kind of expect it when you see something like that. It's going to be huge crafts that people report seeing. You hear people report them. The size of football fields,
like Phoenix, or the triangle, or whatever. They got that politician in trouble because he came out in the alien suit.
Yeah,
made everybody mad.
Oh yeah. Hey, do you remember Dennis Kucinich in, I think it was 2000, the 2007 Democrat primary? He was polling pretty well, and then like somebody out of nowhere came out and asked him, "Did you see it? Did you really see a UFO?" And he said, "Yeah, I did." And his numbers went.
It was worse than the Dean scream.
Yeah, and then he went down to nothing. Yeah, but which he wasn't doing great anyway. But it was almost like he was rising in the polls, and they wanted to immediately
get UFO
get him out of the way. Yeah, and he's not even a UFO guy, but he
just said he saw a UFO.
Yeah, he just said, and he didn't even say it was an alien. He just said he saw something in the sky that he didn't know what it was, and that it was very interesting. But then they really branded him the UFO guy, and I thought that was interesting how in that short of a time we got from, because it was like, well, no serious presidential candidate would say that they saw
this UFO.
So either that shows bad judgment on him to point that out, or he's full of crap, or he didn't really see it. He's just crazy. Whatever. They pulled eyes off, or put eyes on him for that, and pulled eyes off of him for whatever it was he was talking about at the time. But we went from that to on the History Channel, all aliens all the time, and kind of not only that ancient aliens might be real, but that it's almost a given that they are. Mm-hmm. And then here's a bunch of crazy ideas about, well,
maybe that Thor was a god of lightning.
Maybe, and it's down to one I saw. I kind of walked in and it was on the TV, and it was a dinosaur flying saucers, flying around shooting the dinosaurs. Did the aliens kill the dinosaurs? And
seasons 1 through 4 were pretty in the Donican territory. It was like, look at these Nazca lines, but by the time they got to series episode or season 14, and it's basically them just rehashing Marvel at this point. The Norse gods were, which is also another fascinating one too, because every single country seems to have, or I guess area of the world seems to have some kind of god that's over stuff. But I mean, even down where was it? Oh, they had a mud god. I don't remember what it was though, but that god came to Earth and went, "You sure got a muddy place," and then another god helped him. I don't remember which one it was now. I'll have to look it up. But the Earth was mud before God got there, or something. Well, okay. Now that we're here and we've got UFOs, I have 2 directions we can go with this, and you can pick whichever one interests you. Is it possible that when the Anunnaki got here and they're helping people like we talked about, right? What if they were helping people so long that they went, it's probably okay to nibble on them because we kind of nibble on lab mice. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like we're saving the world, but we kind of kill a couple thousand mice every day in these labs. And so what if these people that are trying to save the world can justify it by nibbling on a few thousand of us every day just because they're saving us with all this technology they gifted us? Mm. Or my other way we can go with it is, have you ever heard of Project Bluebeam?
I have.
And do you think all this UFO stuff that we've got on right now has anything to do with the funding for all this Iron Dome stuff they're trying to build everywhere?
Well, I feel like maybe we should go to the Bluebeam.
Okay.
On it, because I feel like that's a little more timely, and I feel like that's a little more, because if we get into Anunnaki, that's a whole other discussion there as far as,
well, specifically, are they nibbling on us?
Right, exactly.
We can do Bluebeam.
If we get into that, we could have to do a lot more explaining things.
Okay, well, that's one of my goals. I'll put a pin in this real quick, and then I'm going to let you go first. Explain what your definition of Bluebeam is. But I feel like every week we're going to bring up some big thing that I feel like we're going to have to explain the next week. So what I'm going to try to do is try not to weigh Cliff's podcast down too much with a lot of high-quality, top-tier bullshit. And so I'm going to try to make these little snippets explaining some of this stuff to you, just in case you're interested enough to see some of this other stuff. Because I like the idea that we're doing local news and stuff. But I kind of also like the idea that we talk about really dumb stuff, too. But...
well, you gotta have both. All work and no play. XTM and Cliff, dull boys.
Of course, our local news today was our real people in Appalachia eating people.
Yeah. There's always something good around here.
We've had a, I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but I'm sure you go driving out in some woody places. There's a lot of people walking. Mm-hmm. A whole lot of people walking that I've never seen before. Obviously, walking from faraway places. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting.
Yeah, you do see that a lot. I think a lot of people maybe got more on, with being able to stay home over the last few years. Maybe some of them over the last almost couple of years, been able to go out and do a long hike.
Maybe so.
You're able to do that. You don't have to go.
Full 5Ks have become very popular over the course of this because you're running and stuff.
But yeah, back to Bluebeam. Just a real quick. You'll probably want to Google this because it's been a long time since I looked it up.
Well, I can.
But since
I
you
can
brought
fill
it
you
up,
in.
Yeah,
I've had the time. I've been in my basement for 2 years.
Okay, well,
go ahead.
My recollection of Bluebeam was that it was basically a project it was a declassified project that was admitted to be real. If I remember correctly, it came from the Pentagon, and it was that they had an idea to have a fake alien invasion, and that they would use advanced holographic projection to put something in the sky, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be a fake alien invasion. Another thing they mentioned was the second coming of Christ, or the Virgin Mary.
A lot of religions have that too, because one of the ones I saw, actually an Islamic guy, because I love watching. I binge religious videos of stuff I don't practice, because there's nuggets of wisdom and everything. And he was an Islamic sort of end time guy, and it was very interesting that he was talking about that they were worried that they were going to fake project the like a new imam coming back, because a lot of the more extreme Islamists are really waiting on that 12th imam, or not, I can't remember the name. It's like another imam to come back, right? And he's going to come back, and he's going to effectively turn the whole world back Islamic, and he's going to do it the way he's supposed to, and he's going to do it with a sword and all this stuff. But there's just one thing. It was one of those hitch slaps back in the day. It was a reference. I even knew what the video was.
Is that the World Islamic Caliphate that the right-wingers kind of...
Yeah, that they fear. But I mean, that's a real thing.
Yeah,
whether or not they were ever able to put it together, a lot of people do. They think that that's what they have.
I just want to make sure that's what they're referring to when they say
Yeah, and the Christians are doing the same thing with their alliances. We all have this group thing that we're doing. But they're worried, this guy was talking about, he was worried that they're going to use Project Bluebeam to simulate an imam cutting the moon in half with a sword. Because apparently there's something, not apparently it is, there's a part in the Bible, or the part in the Quran, where the moon gets split in half with a sword. And Christopher Hitchens used to absolutely ragdoll these poor guys. Because when you're hardcore in your scripture, like you're just a fundamentalist, you're not allowed to say no to certain stuff. And so when they would get you with certain questions, like, do you literally believe the moon was cut in half with a sword? And he has to say yes because his own people are going to make fun of him if he doesn't. So so nothing this guy can say is going to matter to Christopher Hitchens' crowd after that point. But I got curious on that. That's not. It's Project Bluebeam isn't just a fear of right-wing Christian people. There's people, and this was a Middle Eastern video. Like, people have technology everywhere now. And he was clearly talking about they're going to try to fake the moon getting cut in half because that's going to relate to Islamic people, and they're going to need us to support them at some point because it's a one world sort of thing. And I just thought, no, it's very interesting that cultures we don't even know about are afraid of things that we're talking about. It's just these conspiracies are becoming a uniting blanket, and that's very strange to me.
You're right. And
QAnon united a lot of people.
That's what I was going to say. That was almost like the grand unified conspiracy theory.
Yeah, when everybody was like, you know what, we're going to have to check. Nobody was okay with the pedophiles. Was essentially what QAnon was. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
And they even asked Trump about it, and he was like, asked him if he was hunting pedophiles in the debate, and he said something like, "Is that supposed to be a bad thing?"
Yeah, you not want me to hunt pedophiles?
Yeah, but what a crazy time we live in right now, man. But yeah, back to
Project Bluebeam.
To Project Bluebeam. One thing I don't know about Project Bluebeam is the why. What was the point?
What's the point in making it? Yeah. Okay, well, Project Bluebeam is loosely a larger conspiracy theory, or what I would call a framer. Like, Flat Earth is a framer. Okay. You have to use a lot of conspiracies to build what I would call a framer. In order to get to Project Bluebeam, you actually start with chemtrails, because that's what they've been putting a blanket in the air to put the hologram on. So you start with chemtrails. You even have it in movies, like the most recent one I can think of is the new Spider-Man, where he fought Mysterio, because that's what he's using. He has drones that project a hologram out, and it looks like a giant swirling god coming at you and stuff like that. But it's actually just drones projecting images outward,
like the show they
and they're inside it. Yeah, it looks just like a cone made of drones. And the scary thing about that is you could have nanobots do that, or they have drones that do that. Mm-hmm. Like, I saw a drone show, I think some MIT group put together. And it was just these little helicopter drones they would all super, like, fluidly, like a gymnast would go soup.
Oh, they do it
like little bumblebees. They would make, here's a dollar sign, and then they spelled MIT, and I'm like, holy shit! If they had projectors going out this direction, that's just Mysterio on the new Spider-Man movie. And so what they think they're trying to do, with back to your question of why Project Bluebeam, and skipping where you start all the way to the end. The end game that people who believe in Project Bluebeam. They think the fake alien invasion will essentially be like Independence Day.
A uniting event for the world?
Yeah, a fake alien invasion comes down where they kick our asses in the beginning, and now we can fake another one later on. But essentially, if you get attacked by a fake alien group, you have a permanent boogeyman that you never have to explain, and now we can just get infinite funding.
Wasn't it President Reagan that talked about that, I think around the end of the Cold War, that if we had an alien invasion, the whole world would forget about all these petty differences?
That's a part of the conspiracy.
Interesting. And that's kind of something that you see, the whole world, the world body governing everybody. That's kind of something that you see being a pretty common thing talked about from George W. Bush. He started talking about a new world order in 1991, and well, he'd talked about it before, and you hear that term somewhat regularly for a few years, and then it kind of becomes a bad thing because a lot of people on the local regular people are not really interested in a new world order. They're not interested in having a world governing body that controls China and controls them under the same laws. We kind of pride ourselves in our local control of our government in this area. And so we're not going to be, for the most part, on board with that. What about other places? What about Europe? Do you think that they will need that? They're becoming...
I think more the idea behind... because I'm always looking at it from... If we're going to assume that this crazy conspiracy is true, how would I make it happen as a person who, I don't know, who feels like he can trick you or something? And I feel like America has to be... Like, for example, I think the reason we're always going to have certain freedoms is because they can abuse those by abusing your vote, sort of thing, And so you can't, like Star Wars or Star Trek Episode 1, if you're ever just going to watch it, it's about an hour long. It features almost none of the original cast. It has the original captain. I don't know even what the story behind that is. The pilot is, the captain goes to this planet, finds essentially an empty planet, but then he gets kidnapped, right? And the long story of it is he's trying to fight his way out of this underground bunker with all these like holograms and stuff, and he's got this hot girl with him that the aliens just please bang her, we'll feed you. And the very end speech of it is they finally just let him go, and he's like, well, why'd you kidnap me to begin with? He's like, look, these big brain-headed creatures, and they're like, look, we're feeble. We dedicated all of our lives to making this world a better place. But then we kind of made ourselves so smart we couldn't do anything for ourselves anymore, and now everybody's dying and we can't do any labor. So they were trying to get some hulky men and just essentially create them a perfect paradise where they would just fix it themselves so the aliens didn't have to, and they would just give them everything they needed. But he was so freaked out the whole time he didn't know why all this stuff was being given to him, like a giant hamster cage. Here's your woman to bang. Here's some food. The guy's complaining about not having any alcohol. You know what I'm saying? It was freaking him out. And the end speech of the whole thing is, we didn't realize humans weren't adapted to live in captivity, so we're going to have to find somebody else, or we're going to die. See ya, we're going to beam you back up to your ship now, you're useless to us. And that's kind of what the whole thing is. You can't get humans to do anything through forced, essentially I think that's why China's going to collapse in the end.
Two things that brings to me. One is...
Thank you for getting me out of that.
Well, one I think that is interesting is you talk about that you talked about Star Trek. I was actually was going to bring up Star Trek here in just a minute as we continued, because on Star Trek, for example, it shows a world governing body that, basically a planetary federation.
Where they're essentially so bored they're just going into space.
Well, and they had a world body that then became a interplanetary body, and it kind of shows it as an inevitability that will centralize power and centralize away from local control. So you kind of see that that's kind of the way that a lot of people think that we're going. And the theme of this show kind of has been, we go from, and we did it again this time without even intending to, we go from, looking at our area locally and, kind of our heritage and what the natural state of the area has caused to happen here, and then we end up going to where are we going in the future, and that's kind of where this podcast is going. So when I look at this from where we're going in the future, and you bring up the Star Trek and making things easier, I have a couple, or I have a couple of things that brings to mind. From first, I think of the movie Wall-E that we talked about before, where you have everything so easy everything's automated for humans, and they basically live on a cruise ship, and they trash the planet so much they fly away, and everything's so easy on them. They get super fat.
They're in a larval state, essentially.
Right.
They look like big squishy worms.
And robots take care of them. And spoiler alert, the movie's like 20 years old. So
no spoiler alert. I've seen Wall-E, I'm sorry.
That's what I'm saying.
Skip forward 15 seconds.
Yeah. No, by the end of it, it's actually the robots that show people what it's like to be people again, because people have forgotten. And you mentioned that those people had it so good that they forgot, how to work, and they needed.
Yeah, they physically couldn't do it anymore.
Well, that takes you right to the rat utopia experiment. I'm sure you've heard of this.
Yeah, I do know about that. Yeah.
Well, that's where that brings my mind, and in this experiment that I'm not especially familiar with, because I've not read the specifics in a long time. You do a lot of research over the years, and
it gets muddied.
It does, but I do remember the gist of it was that they gave the control rats just enough amount of food to survive, or the rats had to get it, and they lived normal rat lives, while the other group they gave unlimited food, unlimited water, and they didn't have to do anything. All they could, and you had the rats. They got really soft and squishy. They had some of them that just sit around and groomed themselves, and you had other ones that were like out in the streets destroying things, basically, or just fighting each other all the time.
Yeah. Because
they didn't have to struggle to survive, and human beings are kind of the same way. It's like we require a certain amount of struggle.
Yeah, you have to have a little bit of friction, or you don't.
Or I think we go insane. And you either have like something where, like the groomers, it reminds me of like the Hunger Games. You had that upper class society that had everything, and then that kind of reminds me of our upper classes today. You see them carrying on.
They're the most self-loathing people you could ever meet.
Well, they carry on at those award shows, wearing all these nice things and driving up in limousines, or they probably flew on a private jet, and then they lecture us on the way that we need to drive electric cars and stuff. Well, I'd like to drive an electric car. I can't really afford an electric car right now. So
yeah, they're just not about the $60K mark.
If you want to buy me one there, if one of you, Hollywood people wants to buy me one, I'll drive it. But for right now, I've got to drive what I can drive, and I don't need to be lectured about it. And that kind of makes me not want to watch movies and stuff like that.
Yeah, when you see that, it does really make, like, why do you want to take water from that tap when you start looking at Hollywood the way it is? The thing about, like, the celebrity type, when you bring that up, that fascinates me beyond their hypocrisy, is just, we kind of monkey see, monkey do. Like, we want to imitate celebrities for some reason. But if you watch how celebrities are, and it's not all of them, obviously, they're very self-destructive, very self-loathing, obviously not happy people.
It's because they don't have to struggle.
And also after looking, like, if just not really grad level psychology, when things are attacking themselves, self-loathing, there's a reason. You just don't hate. I mean, there's a reason. Context matters. True. And if you're destroying yourself, it's because you hate yourself.
Yeah.
No one destroys themselves that loves themselves on purpose, and it's a lot of outlashing, just the absurd behavior, and that's really fascinating that we will watch.
And we watch it so.
We watch it and we want to imitate it, and it really just goes back to that stupid idiom about would you jump off a bridge with your friends, which is also in Lost Boys, by the way, because quite literally does it.
And I'm sorry to keep on this
because Lost Boys. Lost Boys, the test to join the damn vampire movie, the test to get Michael into the vampires to show him that he was a vampire was at the end of it. They go on a train, or in the middle of the movie, they go to the middle of a train and they all jump off, and he has to also to fly. And it's so stupid that's would you follow if your friends jumped off a bridge, would you meet them on the ground? That's a Thrice lyric. But now somehow we tied all that shit back into vampires. Well, I'm sorry.
No. It's all you got to do that, Tim, because that's what keeps the pod interesting. Because otherwise it'll just be me talking a bunch of dry nonsense all day. No, I gotta have crazy in it because this thing is on. It's on a couple different levels, so we got a dynamic there that works, and that's what you're here for, and that's what I'm here for. But I've got what I was getting back around to is you saw. you saw a lot of this behavior that you would see on TV programs in like the mid, I don't know, mid to late 2000s. You saw a lot of kind of Jersey Shore. What's some other ones? I didn't really watch them.
Road Rules.
Road Rules. Well,
I mean, that's more like a competition.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the beginning of it because people cared more about the deviant behavior than they did about all the other stuff.
Well, yeah, but when people watched that back then, it was kind of like that was
Bad Girls Club.
That was
that a good one?
Insane. I've never seen that, but probably
it's just a bunch of rich girls fighting.
And then I do remember like the shows like the dating shows. I used to work with a girl on graveyard shift, and she would watch these dating shows. The Bret Michaels one, and the Flavor Flav one, and
Flavor of Love.
Yeah.
So sad I remember all that.
Yeah, and you have, but the thing was, back when those shows were on, even that short amount of time, 10 years ago, that was outrageous behavior. Now it's almost like you expect to see that behavior on a regular basis when you go out into your day-to-day life, because for some reason people saw that then, I guess, and thought it was okay to do, but I don't know how we exactly got back from Project Bluebeam to that.
To deviant behavior. I guess I think it ties back into the CIA thing we were talking about, because that all is CIA thing. Like, what if they're making horror movies to make us afraid of certain things, and like they keep releasing Purge movies right before a pandemic, and there's all this weird stuff that maybe that's just the human race self-hating itself because it really does hate society and the thing that it's created, that we kind of want everything to fall so we can get it over with.
Yeah.
Or are we being controlled?
So yeah, and that's awesome how conversation happens like that, because we're on a different level from where we even started, and it all kind of comes back together, and that's why we like to have these conversations, because we never know what's going to happen with them, and we'd really like to have you join with us. And Tim, I have something pretty fun to report.
Okay.
Last time it was the very first podcast. We kind of shat on flat Earth a little bit.
Okay.
Whenever you asked me about it, and I had reached out to somebody I knew who is a really smart guy. Who had talked to me about flat Earth before, and asked him. I said, I kind of said some negative things about flat Earth, and I'd like to have a flat earther to come on and explain some of this stuff in case I'm misunderstanding it, because maybe I'm not as smart as I think I am. Maybe I just believe, all the science I've read and all the maybe all the actual experiments I've done myself. They just kind of confirming my bias, because I started reading, started from the perspective of, elementary school science and learning science my whole life, and then continuing to study it recreationally. Maybe I've just got so into this whole thing that
I've just got so into this round Earth theory. I'm missing something.
Exactly. Maybe I'm so invested to it because I've actually done, just for fun, gosh, I never can remember his name when I'm talking to somebody. Starts with an A. The guy figured out the Earth is round, like in the 1500 BC.
Galileo?
No, it was well before that.
Oh yeah, I know. He's the one that stuck the hole down in the well.
Well, he put a post in the ground, right, and then he was I think he was in Greece, and he sticks a post in the ground a certain length on a certain day of the year and measures.
Yeah,
it,
and he got with one of his buddies,
and they do it, and then he can tell based on the sun rays coming in a certain. He measured the circumference of the Earth at 25,000 miles. It starts with an A. It's Eratosthenes. Eratosthenes.
Probably wasn't that I forgot it. Probably was I was too afraid to try to say that with a hasty accent. So good job.
I keep that one stored in my head somewhere every now and then in case I have to talk about it. But
that Eratosthenes and fire shoes. Go ahead, sorry.
But so I've actually done a little version of that myself. And just because I was interested in it, and to me, the Earth does appear to be round. I've done a lot of recreational astronomy. A lot of the things that the flat earthers say don't make any sense to me, because I've seen these things with my own eyes and kind of have a pretty good understanding of how they happen. But anyway, so I called my friend and I texted my friend, and said, would you like to come on and talk about flat Earth a little bit? And he texted back and said he's not into that anymore, and said he was glad that we were fighting it, which I don't feel like we're fighting it.
No, we're not globe busters.
No, I'm not doing anything like that. I think
globe busters is actually a flat Earth movement. Never mind. We're not specifically going after flat Earth, and I actually want to try to prop it up for fun sometimes.
No, so I wasn't trying to do that. I just wanted to talk about it. My intentions are seriously pure. If you think the Earth's flat and you got something that you think might convince me, send it my way. I'm honestly, I'm not going to watch like a long video on it or anything. So, because
my whole thing with the flat one thing is, and this is something I want to talk about next time, is IQ and belief is a very squishy thing, and IQ studies are also something I would like to bring up. But it's very misunderstood, and the research is changing about stuff, and that's why some people look at a very smart person and then they look at one of their beliefs and it completely discredits the whole thing. But dude, every single person on the planet believes something that's stupid.
Yeah, you're right.
Every one of us has a really stupid belief.
That is why I wanted to talk to my friend about this, because I know for a fact I've seen him do things that a person of average intelligence cannot do. And he has explained things to me that a person of average intelligence, does not understand just by, happenstance. He's somebody who knows this. So that's why I wanted to talk to him about flat Earth. But apparently,
he's no longer.
Yeah, he's not really finding that. He said it kind of triggered him.
You want to find a flat Earther? Because I can.
If you
want to bring, I can. Yeah, I get you.
If you know a guy who you think fits that, or if you know somebody who you think fits that bill, that would come on and be who you think knows what they're talking about and is pretty intelligent.
Well, it's more about like I could sit here and tell you everything about flat Earth, a lot of it, and really try to make these arguments and stuff. But I don't really believe the theory, so it wouldn't be genuine. But I mean, that would be okay. I could play devil's advocate if that's really what you wanted to do to save somebody.
Okay. Well, why don't we do that? And then if somebody says no, Tim, you're still not.
If I'm wrong about something, because that's possible too. Because there's different schools in flat Earth.
Yeah, you don't want to build a flat Earth straw man.
But I can tell you from what I've learned. I can try to tell you the different angles and stuff, not to try to convert you, but just I guess try to help you understand how people get from point A to point Z. With different beliefs and stuff. So
yeah, I appreciate you sticking with us. This has kind of been a bit of a rambler, but I feel like we had a good talk, and I feel like that everything we said kind of went from one topic to the other pretty good. And there's a reason we talked about this stuff. The whole idea of this podcast is to have a conversation and to take it wherever it goes, and that's what we did today, and that's what I want to continue to do.
I think humans are supposed to do that, and us being bottled up and not being able to freely talk. And it's not like 99% of the population was out there screaming the N-word and using profanity and like pulling their genitals out, and it's not like we've had this wild scenario. They want people to not talk about really strange things now, and I'm not even sure if I said something that probably offended somebody. My whole part is, I think we have the right to talk about vampires, and I think we have the right to talk about whether or not homeless people or whether or not hikers really eat people, and I think we need to have the right to talk about whether or not Elon Musk is a vampire. And I think since a lot of people can't do that, me and Cliff are going to do that for you, and if we can get this IRL setup going, you can talk with us too about really dumb crap.
This might be, we already talked about we're not ready for Mars, and if you guys saw that,
I want to come back to that one. We've got more examples of that.
All right, well, I'm hoping that we can do that, and I've got another one to talk to you about when it comes to the moon and space travel. So it ought to be pretty fun. I'm going to take the Tim role on this one, and I'm going to bring in my conspiracy theory, and it's one that I feel like there is some real merit to it.
Okay, cool.
Before we come back next time, stop and watch the documentary called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon.
Okay.
Anybody out there watching this, if you want to know what we're talking about, kind of in between the lines, check that movie out, and we'll go over it a little bit whenever we get back, because this is a pretty interesting one, and it's a lot of crazy stuff. Like, for one, I'll just leave you on this one. It'll be the only thing I say about it. we can't go back to the moon because NASA lost the data on
Oh,
how to get there.
That's a real statement, yeah.
So, watch that movie. You'll find a lot of little things
That's
like
what
that.
they said. I don't know if it's really, but they literally did say that.
Yeah, they did. And so watch that movie. It was available on YouTube for free the last time that I watched it. Look up some stuff in it. Really, look them up because everything in it you can look up and find yourself independent from the movie. At least everything that I did. But the key parts that I looked up, I didn't go through every line by line or anything. But the key parts that I thought, no way, there's no way that's going to be true. Mm-hmm. Look it up, and we'll watch that movie, and we'll get back together. And I don't know if we'll talk about it next week or not. We may.
It's the moon. I don't know. I'm kind of going to have to now that you talk about that because I've got 100 different theories about the moon I want to talk about. So next week you get to hate me and Cliff for being moon landing deniers. No, I'm playing.
See you next time.
See you next time. Buzz Aldrin show up and punch me. Did you see when he punched that dude?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I kind of get those, like, he's punching, and that's a guilty man